Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. Oh, beautiful. You look great. Thank you, darling. Also, we have many Azerasians in our room. We have some incredible people in our room. We have so many that we just can't. But we have some people. We have some people in our room that I'm not going to mention because they fully understand why. Because I don't have time.
Yes, welcome, folks, and Azerasians out there. Left Reckoning 190. Hey, David.
That's so beautiful. That's like up there with like the Trump Sarkar Darkar when he did that Hindi.
Oh yeah, the Hindus. We love you.
Like he put the same amount of energy. Like he's like, I have no idea what this is, but we love
Yeah.
our Azerasians. We love our Azerasians.
That was Trump in Arizona, and sometimes it is tough to figure out what the collective, like Fargoan, for instance. Sometimes I guess that's kind of easy. Arizonan is also if you have dentures. I think that is it. That word starts to look a little bit like you're playing a Temple Run.
That's playing on hard mode for sure.
But we have a big night planned, David.
Yes, we do. I know. It's debate night in the Lone Star State. Where in a little bit we're going to be breaking down live for y'all the Colin Allred Ted Cruz debate. That will be on a different stream, but it will be available on YouTube, Twitch, and anywhere else that you listen to the show. We're opening up the post game, the other side to everybody for some fun tonight.
We'll put the link to that in the description to this video on YouTube.
100%. But we still got a really great and jam-packed Left Reckoning 190 for y'all. In just a little bit, we're going to be joined by Alex Sammon to talk about crypto, everyone's favorite topic. It's somehow not dead.
It reared its head again just in just politics. Is that something we sort of covered, sort of tangential on our politics programming? And now it's just, number one election buyer.
It's crazy how much money they're spending, and we'll be talking with Alex about what it is that they're trying to get with all the money. Obviously, as people probably saw, Kamala Harris has promised to protect crypto assets in order to shore up the black male vote, which is that campaign's
It's very nice. I would think maybe healthcare, and people pointed out there's specific healthcare initiatives to things that disproportionately affect Black people. Like, I think colon cancer was the headline. It's like, how about we just figure out a way to not be the medical debt capital of the world, where there's something called cancer bankruptcies. Like, I think that if we're gonna would probably mean something more for just Black men as a whole. I'm sure there's some Black men, just like white men, who are looking very much at the president to backstop their crypto.
Good bit is like a racist crypto guy, which I can't imagine there are any, who's not seeing Kamala Harris sort of coming around on crypto as like a good thing, and they're just like getting really mad that Kamala Harris is going to protect the crypto of only Black guys.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Just like can't take the W. You know what I mean? Just too fucking dumb to do it.
That would be very funny. Is to just the only guys who get to cash out on crypto are Black. The Black guys.
Yeah. Line up, y'all. Early voting is starting all across the country. It's time to make that future reality. But we're also be talking with Sam Kirsch about some things that are happening right here in Austin that also have large scale repercussions. We talked to Sam and Seneca in the past about some of the attempts from the police union here in Austin to subvert democracy, utilizing some of the most ridiculous tactics. In fact, they were going around grocery stores, public places in the city, and misrepresenting themselves as a police reform group and getting people to sign a petition that did not reform the police. In fact, it gave them much, much more power. Fast forward to today, the police lose that fight, but are still trying to find ways to undermine democracy here in Austin. So we have Sam Kirsch on the program to talk about that fight. as well. There's links below for people to get more information, to read more on the subject, and if you are in the Austin area, to get involved in the show notes. But want to make sure that folks are following that story as well. But before we get to all of that, Matt, there was a letter that was put out recently, yesterday, by Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, sent to Israel, who people probably saw the horrifying, heartbreaking, just inhuman attacks on a hospital in Israel. It'd be interesting to see if David Pakman, by the way, maybe issues a mea culpa for his claims that Israel doesn't bomb hospitals. After that is something that has not only happened once, twice, but now multiple times. But there's this new letter here. I was wondering if we could talk about that a little bit before we get to everything else.
Yeah, ProPublica covers it this way: Blinken to Israel, allow more aid into Gaza or face the consequences. The stern letter from the Secretary of State and the Pentagon comes amid the worst month for relief efforts since the war began. I mean, that's all this stuff is such an understatement that it's almost comical. They're starving people in North Gaza. ProPublica, and also it was just revealed last week that Blinken himself was responsible for obscuring that fact domestically here.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in this weird position where we have to depend on people who should actually be in the cell next to them to change course on the policy. But nonetheless, this is where we're at with this. In one of the most direct and sweeping warnings to date, the Biden administration told Israeli government officials on Sunday that if they did not improve humanitarian conditions in Gaza in the next 30 days, which I would point out is just after the election, the U.S. could reevaluate its military support, so that's a conditional, could evaluate its military support, which has flowed largely without pause for more than a year of the genocide, I would add. In the letter to Israel's ministers of defense and strategic affairs, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, said they were writing to underscore the U.S. government's deep concern over the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza and seek urgent and sustained actions by your government this month to reverse this trajectory. So
Yeah, I mean, just talking about this is from Drop Site News, their summary of this letter. The letter lays out like a lot of the dangers that Palestinians are facing, particularly the threat of a widespread contingent of serious diseases amongst the Palestinian population, as more and more people are huddled into areas. And of course, now as we're seeing that that Israel is bombing the hospitals where people are getting treated. I do not forget that as a result of this genocide against Palestinians, polio has had a resurgence amongst the Palestinian population. 90%, this is from this letter, 90% of humanitarian movements have been blocked within the region. And because of the ridiculous vetting of staff and cargo that is going into Palestine, we are now, and that's probably putting it nicely, by the way, giving them an out and an excuse for what it is that they're doing, has effectively shut off aid from going into the area. And they call in this letter for 350 trucks per day, and they quote humanitarian pause, which is their favorite terminology, for aid and vaccine delivery in 120 days. Now, they sent this letter to the Israeli government, and as Matt said gave them 30 days to comply. Which I'll just say, it's pretty damn sick to say you have 30 days to stop starving people. Because what does that imply? I mean, look, the electoral calendar stuff is sick enough, right? But the fact of the matter is, too, they're saying, hey, y'all can continue starving people for a calendar month, but then you gotta quit it, or else we're gonna stop giving you the bombs that you are using to slaughter all these people.
Yeah, and again, like Blinken, we can't underscore enough that this is a week after Blinken's complicity in this, and again, the CIA. There's these revelations that all these different agencies, three-letter agencies, were themselves making these concerns about the aid known, and Anthony Blinken, the executive branch,
Mhm.
was overruling them. Now, it's hard to know. With the Iraq War, there was a lot of ass covering too. The CIA saying, we don't know this, and also, well, they're involved with such and such intelligence, like how much. But I mean, it's just it's obscene. And the guy who burnt alive, who was, I believe, studying some kind of programming or engineering, that horrific image uh overrules, like they were demanding hospital evacuations with kids on IVs, and those kids just died. And so we don't, like, and so now you finally get a little bit more, uh a little bit, the New York Times is a little bit more forceful in critique and stuff like that. But I mean, it just seems like, and the 30 days, it just seems so cynical. Like, you need to stop this now.
It's
There needs to be a sort of accountability for what's happened, like, let alone changing course.
No, I mean, Matt, I like 100%. And like, we can't play these videos on this program just because they are so graphic. But in them, there's a Palestinian there who's yelling at the camera saying, like, they are doing, and this is why you're seeing this kind of movement, even from the US government, even from, some of the media sources out there, is because what Israel did with this bombing here. Like, the whole thing has been blatant, don't get me wrong, but like, they were this was a bombing that just happened in front of everybody, right? This happened in front of aid workers, all hosts of folks. Just the disregard for even the semblance of like targeting only military operations here. It was thrown out the window. Not remember those first days, Matt, when there was like, oh, we're going to put together a video to see if this missile or that missile came from Hamas or came from that. I mean, this is literally Israel just bombing people in hospital beds in front of observers.
Yeah, and again, like, they're also firing at uh, Irish peacekeepers in Lebanon. Like, it's just absolute flagrant war crimes. I mean, just a war crime speed run.
But the cynicism of this of this deadline being after the election, so now we're outside of like the ability of people to hold that Biden administration, the Kamala Harris administration as well, to account for following through with it. Cynical and nasty enough, but as you noted, and it just has to be said, we can say it 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Anthony Blinken broke the law. He lied to the United States people. He lied to Congress, um, uh, contradicting reports that were being developed by his own department. That is illegal. That is something that he should face criminal charges for. And now we're supposed to expect that same administration, the administration that has been saying one thing to the public about, oh, we're so sad about people dying, and yet people continue to die in these horrific ways, we're supposed to expect them to hold themselves accountable. It's absurd. It is absolutely absurd. But folks, we'll be watching, this, and we will, hold these folks accountable. And we're talking much, much more seriously and much, much more long term than just one election. This is a stain on this country. This is a stain on the Democratic Party that is not going to be able to be washed away easily. We're going to go to these other conversations in just a minute. We're going to be talking about policing here in Texas. And then we're going to be joined by Alex Sammon, to talk about this big ass crypto dump of money into the American democratic process. Do not forget, right after this program, we're going to be doing a live stream of the Texas Senate debate between Colin Allred and Texas Senator Ted Cruz. You're not going to want to miss it. Matt and I have been prepping for it. We'll make it fun, I promise. It's gonna be a good time. So make sure that you stick around for that. That will be on YouTube, Twitch, etc. Right at 7 Central, 8 Eastern. But stick around, watch the rest of the program, and we'll be seeing y'all in just a little bit.
Welcome back, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck. With me, David Griscom. And joining us once again, Alex Sammon, a politics writer over at Slate, this time to discuss his new piece, or one of his newer pieces. A corporate money Death Star is looming over the 2024 election. We're about to see if it wins. Alex, thanks for joining us. To set the table a little bit, can you remind folks who Sam Bankman-Fried is and this giant case study that I thought would mean we maybe wouldn't be here where we are right now, but who's Sam Bankman-Fried?
Yeah, so it's sort of incredible how fast this stuff came back around, or how little was learned by the first time we talked about crypto money in an election cycle. In 2022, Sam Bankman-Fried was like the surprise Democratic mega donor of the cycle. He ran FTX, which was the crypto exchange that had this meteoric rise. He was like the youngest billionaire. I forget what the caveat was, but he was like a 30-year-old billionaire, whatever it was. He just like dressed kind of schlubby, didn't cut his hair. He sort of had this whole self-presentation thing, and that really worked, I guess, in the business community, and based on the billions of dollars he made off of running that exchange, was very interested in getting into politics and influencing politics, and right up until the election day in 22, he was the second biggest Democratic donor for the cycle. So it was like, oh my God, who was it? It was him, and it was goddamn, who's
not Haim Saban.
No, I have to look this up real quick. It was Soros. Yeah, it was him, and it was George Soros. Anyways, so he sort of, and he was very public about this, right? He was like running this company. They put their name on everything, right? They had the patches of the umpires and the MLB, and then also his political giving was also really, sort of public facing and prominent. And he was like giving to Democrats. It was under the auspices of, initially under the auspices of pandemic preparedness. He had this whole, effective altruism. His school of thought was like his political philosophy, how to make the most change, the most effective change in the fastest period of time, and all this. And so, he ended up being like a really important player in the Democratic primary. Specifically, he donated, I think, like $40 million in Democratic primary races. It was sort of pretty obvious that he was donating in races where there was like a left-wing candidate and a moderate candidate, and they were pretty much always pushing the moderate candidate. But like, they were at least were paying lip service. There being like a sort of coherent political philosophy in this. And then his partner was this guy, Ryan Salome, who also gave a bunch of money to Republicans. That was less talked about because that guy didn't do interviews. But, they basically like single-handedly, like Sam Bankman-Fried was, like a corporate money machine. He was like a mega donor, and they had this whole thing going. And as fast as he came up, he disappeared, right? Because he, like, I think by the time election day came around in November, FTX was already illiquid, looking for a bailout, and then he was in jail like a few weeks later. So, it's from the Ritz to the rubble a little bit. It was like, this was the biggest outside spender in terms of donations, like surprise donor to Democratic politics specifically, but also, broadly with Salome. And then the whole company was basically gone overnight, and with it, the political spending machine as well.
And that is not where the story ends, because it's almost as if that didn't happen. And, I do, like you emphasized, they were given to Republicans as well. The Democrat stuff was just better for their PR to talk about. But there's a lot of Democrats, from Cory Booker to Gillibrand, that were pumping this stuff. And so, I mean, like, was there any moment of pause that this, I don't know if it's dark money or gray money, the impact it's having in our system? Or, I guess, tell us where we are today.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, right? Because they took this money, these Democrats specifically, but also Republicans, took this money and they took it pretty gleefully, right? They were like, this is a growth industry. Let's take this thing. It doesn't have a reputation like taking oil money, or like, it was less fraught because no one really knew what crypto was, other than like sort of a get rich quick scheme. And it seemed like it was probably sort of harmless. I mean, I think a lot of people would not say that, but I think, there was a case to be made. You could say like, well, whatever. If it's all vapor, who cares anyways? And And so a lot of Democrats took it. Bankman-Fried claimed he never even knew the positions. This is one of the great things about it. Bankman-Fried claimed he never even knew the positions of any of the politicians with regards to cryptocurrency. So he claimed that this was not an influence operation in any way. He had these grand sort of political ambitions to improve American society, and that was the only reason he was doing this. It wasn't about regulatory arbitrage. It wasn't about influencing policy. And so, like, everyone, or a lot of Democrats were like, yeah, let's take this money, of course. And then, of course, it turned out the money was stolen, right? It was like the whole operation was based on taking money out of people's accounts and like arbitraging. I guess that they were like arbitraging value based on the lag time and exchanges and stuff like that. And like part of that money that they stole was obviously going to donations. So a big part of the FTX collapse aftermath was like clawing back those donations. And like Ryan Salome went to jail for campaign finance violations, right? It wasn't just because of like he specifically went down for that. And so like a lot of these Democrats had to give the money back in like really public fashion. They either had to like, let it be clawed back by the courts, or a lot of them donated to charities or whatever. It was like, and it was embarrassing. And I think for like 10 seconds, it was like, oh man, this stuff is so toxic, you can't touch it. And it's just like, it's just too embarrassing to be seen giving this back again. And then you fast forward like a couple months. I mean, the lag time here is like astounding. We don't go one full cycle. It's like a year later, there's a brand new crypto money machine, and it's way bigger and it's way more efficient and it's totally faceless. And it's now by far the biggest outside influence spender in the 2024 election. And Bankman-Fried's still in jail, right? Like the FTX is effectively gone. But what has succeeded or survived is actually like a well-oiled political spending machine that I think is going to be ultimately like much more effective.
Well, in addition to like, how effective it is, I mean, just reminding folks, because we've been doing crypto stuff on Left Writing for years now. And, every once in a while we feel like, oh, this might be going away. And then it sort of comes roaring back. Could you just set the stakes up a little bit for folks who might have not been following crypto? Like, what is it that like the crypto industry might want to be seeing from American politicians in the next, months to a year?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because one of the novelties about the way that they have influenced this election cycle is like generally industries spend on politicians for like, broader reasons. Like it's very rare that you'll see an industry get in for one specific piece of legislation. Like even really niche groups like the Israel lobby, you wouldn't see them go in for one bill. But with the crypto stuff, there's one bill. It's the FIT 21 bill. It's their like preferred regulatory standard, and it's the thing that would like confer legitimacy onto crypto as like a viable and real sector in the economy, in the financial economy. It would move the regulation of that industry from the SEC over to the CFTC, which ultimately just means that the Securities and Exchange Commission is a very big and effective agency in a lot of ways. It has enforcement power. It has manpower. It has, all these things that make it a capable regulatory body. And if crypto is viewed as a security, which, currently it is, then it's regulated by that agency. They hate that. They really don't want that. It's just too much oversight. It's too much scrutiny. And so they want to be regulated by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, CFTC, which is much smaller, obviously does not have the manpower or the enforcement power or the history of wrangling an industry like that's this size. And so they know they'd be much better off under that regulatory regime. So what they're saying is like, we want to be regulated. Like, this is like actually what Facebook used to do. This is sort of there's some salience with that as well. They're like, we want to be regulated. Like we're all on the same page here. Like, let's keep this above board. Like we want to play by the rules. Just give us some rules to play by. But they're not saying like we accept the rules that exist. They're saying like we're going to write these rules and then we will play by them. And by passing this, our whole industry will go from being effectively illegitimate. Like right now, the cases the SEC has filed against them is against Coinbase and against Ripple and these things. It's like the whole thing is fundamentally not legitimate or legal is another word that comes to mind. But so this is what they want. That's a long way of saying they have a specific piece of legislation that they want, and they want to see it passed into law. And they want to see it passed into law as soon as possible. And the spending is all about that. It's like, it's really, and there are flourishes here and there where there's like, oh, they do some stuff. I think we'll talk about it too, the way they message on it or don't. But what it really cooks down to is like, they want that bill and they will do whatever it takes to get that bill across the finish line.
I would like to just dwell on that. They want to confer legitimacy on this. That's because it's not, like as you said, legitimate. They're not giving crypto to these campaigns. They're giving real U.S. Government dollars, right? And like that part of it is just so insane to me that it's worse than fossil fuels, in my opinion, because guess what? Those industries actually do something. They have a malevolent impact on our political system, but whether it's fossil fuels or Facebook, for that sake, there's an actual product there. Crypto, there is not one. And it's just wild to me that, like, we've seen the uses for crypto, right? Buying drugs on the black market or otherwise money laundering. And at that point, it's like, well, I think we've seen the end of the practical uses for this, but now it is buying elections. And that's a pretty practical use for this thing that should be considered funny money, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. Right. So it's interesting too, right? 2 years ago, there was a lot of talk about use cases for crypto. Like that was still, there was, as part, same thing with like Sam Bankman-Fried's political philosophy. There's a positive vision for the world, for American society, and for this technology. It was like, it was going to do something. And I don't remember what it was, but they had some theory of the case. And that's just, you just don't hear that at all anymore, right? Like that's gone. And they don't need to. Why would they need to make a case for why it should exist? What they figured out is that if you spend enough money, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you've conjured up some practical usage for this thing. Of course, there doesn't need to be one. It's useful insofar as it's made a lot of people very rich, and then that is very easy to convert to political power to perpetuate that system. So, that whole thing is gone, and they obviously don't feel any pressure to make that case anymore. And I think it's pretty notable that is what's going on. But it is an innovative technology in the sense, right, as you point out, that what they're doing on a campaign finance level is innovative. It actually, we haven't seen it before, and there's like a lot of different parts of this that are novel, and there's some that are not so novel. But the one thing is, like, the approach that they've had to this point is they've raised a ton of money, right? They've raised $215 million. There's some disagreement about exactly what the number is, but the FEC, if we go straight to the FEC, that's what the number that we get. Huge amount of money for one super PAC, right? It's gigantic. And what they've done so far is not even spend very much of it. They're just dangling it over the heads of politicians. And that's something like we haven't seen, where they basically have the $215 million pot, and they say, like, don't get any ideas or else we will drop this on your head. And so what does a politician do? Like, they obviously don't say anything about crypto, right? You don't want to risk that. But the outcome is that, like, they don't even have to spend it. It's like, it's very cheap. And like, compared to paying for lobbyists or paying for ad space or paying for, door knockers or whatever else, it's like much better to just hold this bag of money over someone's head and say, like, we could spend this, depending on how you choose to act. And then you don't even have to. And it's like, so it's both like the biggest money intrusion we've seen. And crypto makes up a stunning percentage of like outside corporate spending in the cycle. But also, like, they're not going to spend the whole money, the whole pot, because they don't even have to. And when you get down to, like, the dollar per vote sort of efficacy on that, it's pretty cheap. It's pretty effective. And every other industry that spends big money on elections is taking note of that. I mean, that's like a real technology that they can use on an electoral level.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is it does seem to be like other reactionary forms of dark money. I mean, APAC, a model in general. What do you make of the Harris? She recently talked about her plan for black men involves, in addition to like specific health initiatives, crypto, I think a bailout, maybe. I don't know. What do you make of, as all these guys from the crypto boosters are going more and more right wing, Harris is also courting and using it as one of the top lines in one of her important outreach endeavors. Yeah,
so it's really interesting too, because the crypto money in Silicon Valley generally, we've seen like some pretty rightward drift, and like their signature race, like their big ticket race so far. Maybe there are three of them, but the first race was they crushed Katie Porter in the California Senate race. They threw like $20 million, I think, at Katie Porter to run her out of that race in March of this year. And so that was one. And then they threw a bunch of money at Jamal Bowman in that New York congressional race to get him out. Again, like, Katie Porter has like a little bit of a history of like financial regulation, right? Like she knows, she's from the Warren School of regulatory ambition. Like it sort of made sense that they wouldn't want her. There's a New Yorker piece that came out where they talked to her and she's like, I didn't really say anything about crypto at all. I was very confused, which is true. But like, if you know her record, like that sort of makes sense. With Bowman, it was like, I don't know. It was just like an opportunity to flex some muscle. They threw some money in there after AIPAC had already thrown in $25 million. And it was just, some of them, they're just like running up the score a little bit. But the big one is Sherrod Brown in Ohio. And they spent $40 million so far on behalf of Bernie Moreno, who's the Republican car dealer who's running against him in that Senate race. And so it's like the political persuasion of this outfit is pretty obvious. But at the same time, right, it's so much money that I think the Harris campaign has felt like we need to bury the hatchet with them a little bit because it's just a liability to have that much money out there ready to be as like a fully partisan entity against us. And, she's from California, like the Silicon Valley connection is very obvious. She's much friendlier with tech. And yeah, I mean, that announcement to me was so funny, right? Because it's like crypto lobbyists have been swarming in DC for the last 2 years. Like that's just been going on, even actually longer than that. But then you have this massive political spend on, independent expenditure on campaigns as well. And then Harris saying we gotta reset the famous quote on this is that we need a reset with the industry. And then, a couple days after that, it's like our plan to do outreach to black men who are not coming along in terms of the polling with the Harris campaign is like number 3 was like safeguard crypto. It's a funny thing because it's like you could read that and say, well, safeguard crypto assets, protect against whatever. It's like it doesn't obviously read as like this is a giant industry giveaway. It's only one sentence, but it's like if you know the context, all the spending, all the lobbying, what's in this bill, that like the way that the crypto lobby has talked about this initiative. It's really obvious what's going on there. And then, that cynical gloss on it to be like, well, slightly more black men own crypto than any other demographic group. So this is actually us looking out for them.
That's bad. that happened.
It's hard to look at that with a straight face and be like, oh, great. Like, that makes perfect sense to me. And the context is irrelevant.
You want to address that? How about postal banking, right? or all these? We got disproportionate number of black men invested in crypto. How about all black people and everyone gets healthcare, right? Like this are protecting certain people from their bets. I mean, it's like saying we're going to protect racetrack investments. It's just like this is they were and look, they're
right. Like
and
who
a lot
plays
of these
the lottery? It's like should we underwrite the lot? It's like.
Yeah, and a lot of these Democrats, like Cory Booker, they've had this rhetoric that has been basically PR for the industry for a long time. It's like we need to make sure this is growing in a safe way. Well, it's a scam. Like you can't grow a scam in a safe way.
And sorry, just like to add to it too, that like one of the things that's really dangerous about this industry is that again, like the crypto, the Bitcoin. It doesn't have any value in and of itself, right? It has to be sold to somebody, right? Which means like you have to have a sucker to sell your product to. And the fact that more and more people from marginalized communities, more and more people from poor communities are like buying into these things is not so much that like, oh, these people now have an opportunity to participate in this new economy. It's that they're the ones buying, the speculative asset, and the hope is for the people who are selling it to them that they'll be the ones holding the bag.
Right.
So please go.
Jay-Z, I mean, I forget what they like did something where they dropped off a bunch of pamphlets in a housing block and said, here's crypto, there's your financial literacy guy. That's coming from a capitalist. Okay, I expect that from Jay-Z. You're running for president of the United States, and one of your main things is we'll protect the profile pic, little guy you bought in I forget what they even called now. What were the images that the crypto aligned images? No.
Oh, the NFTs.
NFTs, yeah,
NFTs.
right. It's like what that is so insulting to me that's where we're at. But I mean, I guess this is a campaign that's ducking any kind of organized financial block as much as they can. So you shouldn't expect much from Harris. But it is really, I mean, I think maybe Biden was slightly better just because he's so old and can't like the fuddy-duddy that can't be open to it, but it's one thing that is a pretty bad sign of a potential Harris administration.
Yeah, it's just really interesting. And I mean, I think, right, the one thing that's like worth saying is that if you're going to be afraid of like any sort of like corporate money outfit in the cycle, it is crypto. It's like, you know, I don't know if this is exactly to the moment updated, but it's like a few weeks ago, it was like 44% of all corporate money from this election cycle came from the crypto industry. Like, wow. It's a massive number. It's like Koch Industries is like number 2. And we all know about like the incredible benevolence and influence of the Koch brothers and their whole political spending operation is such a distant second. They put in $25 million. Crypto is in for 274, or no, they're in for 120 of the 270 that have been spent so far, and they have more that's on the sidelines. It's like it's so much money that it sort of makes sense. You can't really ignore it. But of course, you can also say like there are just, you know, it's so funny because like, is there a crypto voter? Of course there is, right? Like, it's an insane thing to be like, well, this is a really important demographic we have to have. And the funny thing is that exact sentence is what the industry has put so much money into, is like trying to convince politicians that there is such thing as a crypto voter, and they know very well that there isn't one. And I think everyone is aware of that, but it's like, you know, when there's that much money, it doesn't really matter what the facts are. Like, it's the same thing with the use case. It's like, well, you know, is it plausible? Is it so objectionable that you can't even spit it out? Probably not, and therefore it's like, well, that plus money equals legitimate. So, or you have to take it seriously.
Well, Alex, I have to ask, you know, when they are spending this money, are they using their free speech to talk about the importance of crypto and what smart regulation looks like, or are they just throwing things at the wall?
Well, hey, it's a great question. I'm so glad you said that, because they do the same thing that the Israel lobby does, that AIPAC has done in its advertising, which is, of course, they don't mention the issue at all. Like, and you know, it's like so much of AIPAC spending in this cycle, which is also really substantial, you know, largely in primaries more so than in the general, but they don't talk about Israel policy because they know that the Israel policy that they specifically back is very unpopular, especially for Democrats. And if it's not unpopular, it's just not a concern. It's just like, it doesn't even rank. And it's just like, you can't win elections being like, you know, this person supports like, you know, unlimited arms transfers to Israel, blah, blah, blah. You can't cut a 30-second ad on that and win an election. So they don't talk about that stuff. They don't talk about it at all. And the crypto lobby has done the exact same thing, where it's like, if you watch the ads they're doing for Bernie Moreno in the Ohio Senate race, for example, you're not going to hear anything about crypto. There's not one sentence, not one, you know, it's like not even like a sidebar about it. It's like, it's about like immigrants and immigration and how like immigrants are bad and scary. And you know, other stuff. I've seen these House races they've done, even here in New York, like they're behind like a handful of House Democrats who are sort of vulnerable and stuff. They've sort of brokered this detente with the Democratic Party to spend in some of these swing districts. So, but it's like, you don't hear about crypto in the Democratic races. You don't hear about crypto in the Republican races. Like, they're not going to talk about crypto because they know as well as anyone that it's not a winning. Certainly, if they said what they wanted to do, it's not a winning policy. It's not a winning proposal. But even the issue itself is just so low salience for people that it's like, there's no point in talking about it at all. So they don't. They just don't make a mention of it. And so despite being the biggest spender, despite having the biggest influence on the cycle, you would never know if you just watch TV and you know, sort of engage with the messaging. It just doesn't come up.
Yeah, the only people it's salient to are people who are holding it. Like, I think Silicon Valley in general is probably ready to move on to like AI and quantum computing, but there's a lot of guys sitting on some stacks of coins and shit that they need some insurance on.
And it's just like, I don't know, it goes back to this point that you were making earlier about like, you know, Jay-Z and the black community and stuff. Like, you think of like the ads that they were running in 22, you know, like there's like a Spike Lee commercial, and you know what I mean. They obviously were targeting this demographic specifically, and then FTX went belly up, and it was like, oh wow, the whole thing is actually based on crime, right? It's like it's actually just like totally fraudulent. And then to come back around for that to happen and to go right back to, I think it's like pretty stunning to be like, oh yeah, that did happen, but like let's not lose sight of the fact that we're just going to continue to do this. Like there are fewer. You don't see those like the Super Bowl commercials or whatever. We're not going to see the Super Bowl commercials. We're not spending on that anymore. But they are spending on commercials. They're just they're October, November commercials. It's more effective use of money. And you know, it's just like,
Right.
it's just morphed in that way. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, all of those Super Bowl ads, like the dumb money brought in after that, those people went underwater, and you get enough dumb money. Now it's time to fish for the politicians. But Alex Sammon, it's Alex_Sammon over at Slate. Anywhere else people should follow you?
Yeah. Slate's where I'm doing most of my stuff. So I'm there. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and stuff, but you know, read me at Slate. That's probably the best place to find me. I've got an editor there, and they got some nice web design and stuff. So it's looking best over there. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Alex.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back, Left Reckoners. David here. And today we have a story a bit close to home. We're joined again by return guest on Left Reckoning from Austin DSA, Sam Kirsch. How are you doing, friend?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm all right. Thanks for having me.
Really happy to have you back on. People, there's a link below. Last time we had Sam on, we were talking with him and Seneca about policing, and we're going to be talking about that again today. Just really quick for folks. One thing that's been kind of notable, I think is going to be important for this story, is the G file. And we don't have to get really deep in the weeds, but this is something that after long years of work has hopefully is going to be something that's going to be available to the public. Could you talk to folks about what the G file is and why it's been such a focus of organizing in Austin?
Yeah, for sure. So the G file is a confidential file that Austin Police Department and the city of Austin keep that has the records of all of the disciplinary actions that APD carries out against police officers, which could be anything from just like a slap on the wrist to something a lot more serious. And with the Austin Police Oversight Act, which Austin DSA fought for and we ended up winning with over 80% of the vote, that is something that would force city of Austin to make that publicly available. But the city of Austin and Austin Police Department and the Police Association have been fighting tooth and nail to keep secret.
But recently, we got some very good news on that front. And I just want to sort of hold that up as we get into the main story here. Is that this is a very important thing that's going on in regards to this. So there's a new kind of police contract that's being negotiated. Could you talk about that contract negotiation and what the controversy is here?
Yeah, exactly. So right now we're faced with the first tentative police contract since the passing of the Police Oversight Act, which imposes a lot of conditions on what a police contract in Austin can have that has to be in line with the Austin Police Oversight Act and the oversight and transparency mechanisms that we won, including the status of the G file. And so this tentative contract would cost $220 million over 5 years, which is on top of the money that APD has already been given this year, which was an additional $18 million, and which would be on top of money that APD would request in the following years, because this contract is really just for police pay and benefits, not tanks and guns and all the other things that, the Austin Police Department would be demanding from the city. And the key thing to understand here is that in 2021, the state ledge passed a law, HB 1900, which prohibits municipalities from reducing their police budgets even by $1. And so any increase to the police department means that that is the new floor. And so not only does this contract not secure an open G file, and not only is it so expensive that it would force the city of Austin to cut jobs to paramedics, to social workers, to lifeguards, to firefighters, to librarians, to parks workers, and just to city workers across the board. It's also been negotiated. And when I say, it's a tentative agreement, it's a tentative agreement between the two sides of the negotiations, between the negotiators for the Austin Police Association and for the city. But the negotiators that the city of Austin hired are actually lawyers from a law firm called Rampage Law, which defends some of the most brutal cops in the country that commit acts of police brutality, wrongful death cases. And also, it's the same law firm that the city of Uvalde hired after the families of the kids who were massacred while cops in Uvalde stood by and did nothing as the school shooter just killed 21 people. It's the same law firm that is defending Uvalde against those families in lawsuits. And so the real big thing for me, in addition to the cost and the lack of the status of the G file, is that very few people understand who these lawyers are and what their interests are. Because of course these are, future, these cops are future clients for Rampage Law, and Rampage Law is negotiating on the city's behalf, which really is on all of Austin's behalf.
So there's a few other things I want to get into, but just focus on the law firm for a second. What's the role of the city with the law firm? So are we saying here that this is a city appointed law firm, or is this recommended by the police to the city?
No. So the way that it works is they actually hired a woman named Sarah Griffin, who is now the chief labor relations officer for the city. In addition, and she gets like a super high salary. It's something like $400,000-$500,000 per year as that role and she was hired right at the time of the previous police contract negotiations that we ended up killing started. She had worked at Rampage Law for a number of years, and alongside her, the city of Austin has been paying, I think it's around $3 million so far, to a man named Lowell Denton, who's a lawyer for Rampage Law. He's one of the partners. He's one of the main guys. And so they are hired by the city to negotiate, again, supposedly against the police.
Okay, yeah. So that's a pretty interesting. And so in terms of the oversight here, what level of oversight is there from the council system?
So from city council, there's not really a whole lot they can do. I mean, the city council can pressure the police chief to take certain actions, but again, we're talking about having lawsuits of that the city of Austin has paid out of over $30 million at this point since 2020, on top of the costs of the city having to actually fight those cases. But the key thing, one of the key things in addition to the G file that is in the Austin Police Oversight Act, should it be fully implemented, is having oversight through the city's Office of Police Oversight, as well as through the Community Police Review Commission, which is a civilian arm. And the city's Office of Police Oversight, it exists, but it's totally powerless right now. And so what they would be able to do, should Prop A Police Oversight Act be implemented, they would have access to all police records. They'd be able to gather evidence, interview witnesses, and they could make disciplinary recommendations. And so, they couldn't directly fire police. That is obviously, for the police chief to do, but it would be this independent from the police department arm to make those recommendations. And by the way, it would also allow people to make anonymous complaints to the Office of Police Oversight without fear of retaliation from APD.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, could you remind folks about how this oversight was won, and the popularity amongst Austinites of oversight of the police?
Yeah, so the story is quite funny or interesting in a way because, Austin DSA helped gather signatures for that. This was put out by a nonprofit called Equity Action. Um, and we got signatures on the ballot because people want police oversight. It's something that is pretty popular still and extremely reasonable. But what ended up happening was the city of Austin ended up delaying that ballot initiative in 2023. And in the time that it was delayed, we discovered that the police association was actually putting out their own sort of version of a police oversight act, which obviously had no real police oversight. And they were actually lying right to people's faces. They were claiming that they were Equity Action. And of course they were telling people, hey, do you want to sign a petition for police oversight? And who would say no to that? And so
just Sam, not to
yeah.
cut you off, but I mean, like this was absolutely egregious, listeners. Like,
Yes.
they got my mother with this kind of thing. They got a lot of people that I know because they were hanging out around HEB and they were saying exactly what you're saying. Hey, do you want to do something about the police? Do you want police reform? Do you want police oversight? All this kind of stuff. And it was a bald-faced lie, frankly. And I mean, as frankly as like egregious as it gets for an institution to be doing something like that, because it shows a complete contempt for democracy. Because it's one thing for the police and their allies to be out there in public advocating for their positions. It's a whole nother to be going out there and misrepresenting yourself to the public. And I remember as we talked with you in Seneca about a year ago, I mean, they were paying folks. A lot of the folks didn't even really know what it was that they were doing. They were just sort of told, hey, I'll give you $10, $15 an hour to get people to sign up on a petition, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we even were able to get one person from them to leave their job because they were not even getting paid by the police association's front group, which they called Voters for Oversight and Police Accountability. So, yet again, just lying about who they are and what they're doing. And they ended up spending $287,000. The Austin Police Association was essentially the sole funder with, I think it was $1,000 from Corpus Christi Police Association. So what we ended up doing was we would find them, like you said, they'd be outside HEB and Target and all these places. And we would confront them as they're like mid signature, having conversation with people and tell them, hey, these are with the police association. They're not actually fighting for police oversight. And they ended up getting incredibly aggressive. One of them spat in my face, threw punches and kicks, because they knew they could act without impunity because they knew who they were working for, the police association. After that happened, it was outside Target. People called the cops. Obviously, I knew that the cops weren't going to come and defend me. And so they just went completely, unhinged. And yeah, like you said, it became a huge story because, I mean, even local media, like even the groups like Fox and CBS and NBC, mainstream local groups that would normally never be covering police in a negative way, they were so outraged that they were covering this just totally shocked.
I mean, it was there's a whole other conversation we could have about Austin politics, but it was a huge overstep that I think really blew up in their faces in a lot of ways. But just to kind of circle back and talk about like the kind of actual items. What we're talking about here, and jump in at any time, Sam, to tell me if I'm wrong. But what we're talking about here is there's a police contract that's being negotiated. The negotiators have a relationship with a law firm called Rampage, and we've already gone through them. I think the name sort of speaks for itself. There's a worry here that all of the accountability that has been won with overwhelming support of Austin voters could be undone. On top of that, because of the law firm The Ledge, this high level of police budget means that this could become a permanent fixture. So two quick questions here.
Yeah.
One, do you know how in relation this police budget is with other major Texas cities? And two, what's the kind of timeline here that we're talking about in terms of being able to, push back against this?
Yeah. So in terms of the police budget in and of itself, I know that the APD officers here in Austin are the highest paid cops in the state already. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I know that it's a sort of a comparable percentage, more or less, but still they have the highest pay in the state. And, critically, this is something that, even local AFSCME 1624, the union that represents city workers across the board, have come out in opposition to this. The United Workers of Integral Care, which are the mental health first responders. When you call 911 in Austin, you can choose to ask for a mental health first responder, although they are still struggling to get more money from the city, so that they can actually be doing that work 24/7. They have also come out in opposition to this because they recognize this is one pool of money, and paramedics are also super underfunded, especially relative to the police. So they all recognize that this is going to massively harm them. And then in terms of when this is expected to happen, on October 24th, at 10 a.m., Austin City Council is scheduled to vote on this contract, and we're going to pack City Hall. We're turning out people. We're phone banking. We're knocking doors. We're getting people to turn out and tell them no to the contract. And I would hope that they also fire this law firm and hire negotiators for the city who are actually going to use a stronger hand against the police association so that they can have a contract that secures all of our civil rights and oversight that we won with the Austin Police Oversight Act, and that is not so expensive that it's going to cause cuts to jobs across the board at all these other departments that really do keep us safe.
I think that's a good pitch there. And I'll just say to our listeners out of state or even, in Austin that the oversight that we're talking about here is very critical and important. But I think that sometimes folks from out of state don't, maybe they do. We don't have the best reputation in Texas. But, people sometimes are shocked to see the impunity that police officers sort of have in this state. So this kind of oversight, isn't stuff that's like so out of bounds, so super radical or, nuts. This is basic kind of democracy that the people who are our public servants should have a responsibility to be overseen by the people, and this is empowering us to be able to do that. So the fact that they have fought for so many years now to prevent this kind of very simple, I don't want to downplay the reforms, but you know what I mean? It's just like, it's kind of ridiculous, the kind of the stuff that they're pushing back against.
Yes, you're right. It's really not that radical. And again, that's why, it's reasonable. It's why 80% of people voted for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. Well, Sam, I know we talked about the date. Anything that people in town or around should keep their eye out or can look into if they want to get involved?
Yeah, we'll put a link in the description to our link tree, which is going to have all the actions. We're getting people to send emails to their council members, having them call their city council members, telling them to vote no, and then we're going to be doing a big turnout. And I also wrote a couple of articles on this topic in more detail that are published in Austin DSA's publication, which is redfault.com. So I'll get David to put links to both of those in there as well.
Sure will. Well, again, thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you.